Hi there guys, Gary here with JamVFX. Welcome to this new tutorial. We've got a special starter for possibly 10, well, probably 5. And these are going to be 101s, and by 101s I mean basically best practices, beginning stuff, how to go about doing stuff. And so this is a modeling 101. And this was came about because of someone I know who wants to get better at their modeling and really felt that, you know, they wanted to find out what are the best practices when it comes to building things. So this is basically what this is. It's a modeling 101. It's to teach you best practices. So I've got a series of guidelines that I stick to when I'm modeling, and I don't really think about it anymore. I just kind of do it because I'm 52, if you didn't know that already, and I've been doing this for quite some time. So I'm going to just go through the list now. So here they are, from 1 to 8. Number 1 is reference. Don't go modeling stuff out of your head. If you have an idea, at least draw it down. Do some sketches, try and refine it a little bit, and then work from those. Do some, plan views or whatever it is you're going to do, and kind of work from that. Don't just go through things in your head. Always look for reference. If you are doing an interior, look for some really nice interiors. You'll find things in there that you can copy, or you can at least get ideas from. Make sure you're used to looking at actual room layouts. Get a good idea of actual sizes of rooms, 2.1 meters high and all that malarkey. There's all this information that's out there. Use it. Reference is very, very important. Number 2 is scale. Whenever you build anything, if you don't build it to scale, you will find that anytime you want to do something destructive or dynamic with it, you are going to find that you're going to have to do some funky maths to make it all work correctly. If you build something in a world that is predefined, and you know that your item is, say, 14 centimeters high, say, not 14 millimeters, that's tiny. If it's 14 centimeters high and you build it on your units and you haven't worked it out and you've built it 14 meters high, when you knock it over, it's going to be very, very slow to get to the ground with dynamics. Whereas if it's 14 centimeters high and it's correct in relation to your environment, it's going to be whoop, bang, it's going to hit the floor. So always make sure that you're working to proper scales. It also means if everyone in you're working in a project are all working to proper scales, everything will just work. Number 3 is blocking. Now, blocking kind of has 2 meanings in terms of animation. One is blocking out animation frames, where you basically put your key frames, your most important frames, and then you can just time those out, spread them out until you get the right timings and stuff. But blocking, when it comes to modeling, basically means start with the building blocks, start with the primitives that you are given in your scene. Use your spheres, use your cubes, use your cones, use anything that's just there from primitives, because if you start with the primitive, already you've got good surface topology. That's very important as well, but we'll come back to that. When you start with basic primitives, you can build the basic shapes, get it all together all in one, and then you can go and add more detail. So number 4 on that point is clean topology. And by that I do mean not messy triangles over the place. You want to build mostly everything with quads if you can. Quads are always going to be easier and better to use than triangles. If you are building a static object which is not going to move in any way or form, it's just going to sit there. It's just got to be textured nicely. You can get away with something which is a little less perfect. But the more you get into the habit of building clean topology, the better it is always going to be. When someone suddenly turns around and goes, do you know what? We need to twist this. And then you can say, well, you can do that because I've built it in a way that means it's easily twistable. Yes, clean topology. Number 5 is bevel, not subdivision. Right. What I mean by this is, it's very easy to build something and just throw on a subdivision and look at it and it'll be really beautiful and smooth. But in a lot of cases when you do subdivision, you only want it on small areas, not on big areas. So for example, if you've got like a box and you want to have nice rounded edges, you have to put in subdivisions in order to make sure that you have less distance between one edge and another edge for it to basically create a nice smooth edge. So you put in a load of stuff in between, but you don't need that stuff in between. So rather than waste putting polygons all over the place, take your edge that you want to basically have a round edge and put a bevel on it. create a chamfer if you want to make it like it's just like two lines either side, or actually add more of a slight curve into it. That's the way to do it. Every single time you get less polygons, you get less mess, and it's quicker. It's a lot quicker to do stuff with later on down the line, trust me. The next one, point 6, is detail passes. When I say detail passes, what I mean is start with the big picture, then add the next level of detail, then the next level of detail, and then final level of detail. You normally probably need about four passes. Most people get away with kind of like 3 in a refined pass, you see. But basically, it's don't try and do the detail early. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Do that blocking, then do a bit more tidying up, a bit more detail that's mid-level, and then do the next level of detail, which is smaller down again. There's a kind of a, if you're doing something like any model, there's kind of a ratio thing, which is how much detail you should see on the surface. If you start with the big blocking first and then go to medium and then go to the little stuff, it is always going to work better, and it always feels more accurate and more real. It also is better for scale, if we're going to go back a bit. Number 7 is build for purpose. Now, we've just kind of covered this a little bit with the bevel, not subdivision, and the clean topology. If you have got a surface which you know is definitely going to have to deform, make sure you have enough edge loops in there to be able to give it enough deformation. If you're not going to have it deform, don't bother putting in edge loops. If you're not going to have it to bend, don't do it. But if you do work in a clean way, when it comes to if someone says you need to actually put that stuff in to bend it or to twist it or to deform it or make it fall to pieces, you've got information there that you can build upon. And the last one, and this is by far the most important one, I've been doing this for 7 minutes now, and I know we need to get on with the rest of this to show what's going on, but the most important one, in my opinion, is patience. Because this is not a quick career in that you can just suddenly learn this stuff overnight. You have to practice and practice and practice and practice to be good at anything. When I started doing this for a living, I was shocking. I'm not going to deny it. Patience is a virtue at any time, but when it comes to modeling and learning a craft, patience is the most important thing you're going to have. So take your time. Don't think it's going to happen overnight, but do not give up, because there's one thing about this career is it's very, very rewarding. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now, and let's go from these guidance points from here in the modeling into actually building this thing. So let's get to it. And here we are. Here I am going through the internet trying to find what will be hopefully the best camera to show off the process of modeling. Obviously there's loads of places where you can look for this stuff, and if you can find multiple pictures of the same object, even better, because you can get angles and stuff to see where bits are. But what I wanted to do was find something which I thought would work, just to basically get across all of this basics, all the parts and things that I was talking about. So the one I found that I really liked the most was this one, the Mark 27 whatever it is, from an antique camera website. And obviously the next step once I had that was to get just one of them in particular, one angle in particular, take it into F-Spy and generate a camera. Now these two have already been composited together to be in a single picture, so getting one of them out was going to be reasonably okay. I was very aware though that the angle might not be accurate because I've repositioned it differently to where it probably would have been in the original photograph, but maybe not perfect, but at least it would give me some pretty good mark points, or at least marking points. Turns out there's actually not a lot of straight lines on this. By the way, F-Spy, if you haven't used it, is absolutely superb. It gives you camera position, camera orientation, and what you can also do is you can change the image reference distance. So if you know, for example, that I'm back to the 14 centimeters, if you know that is 14 centimeters high, you can then say, right, I'm going to change that, the angle on that to be not 4 meters, but say 14 centimeters. I don't know. What did I put it to in the end? 4 centimeters. I think I'm probably going to change that once I've sorted out the directional stuff. But F-Spy now is a really, really good tool, especially for any building of geometry. But no, it's as I say, we're working with a very simple picture, and fundamentally we should be able to build this relatively quickly. I actually built it in about an hour and 20, I think, altogether. At least got it to where you saw it in about an hour and 20 minutes, which was a bit longer than I think it probably would have taken. But I did spend a while in here first, making sure that it was all correct, as close as I can possibly get it to inside of FSpy. There may also be points where I've probably gone off and come back. But as I say, I'm leaving this as is because I want to. Yeah. So there we go. That's me coming back. And I'm looking again at trying to get the axes right. So I'm saying, okay, right. So let's say it's 14 centimeters. So let's pick that part there, and then let's set the top point to be 14. And there you go. So that's my height. And then again, I'm adjusting everything just to. I mean, the more time you spend in FSpy, sometimes the longer it takes to get things done. No word of a lie, because you're twiddling and faffing. But if you do have a really good picture with some very good straight lines, you can get away with murder. It's great. You can do things really quickly. So here I am just bringing in, and you'll notice, by the way, that's actually 3.3 of Blender. Again, with all the other bits and bobs that are required built in, and there it is. The image pulled in. And again, there's our box. Now, obviously, we're going to start with very basic shapes because they are the best way to go forwards. So I'm now going to move that up and place its corner in the origin, and I can start to pull out what I think the initial shaping points are. Now, you may notice that I am pulling it all over the place and trying to match it to edges that are inaccurate on the right hand side. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. People do make mistakes. We all do them. It's perfectly natural, and don't worry about it. Everybody does it. So I'm looking at this and trying to get a base shape which will work. It's a matter of anything, just pulling things around and like matching off edges to edges. Those two edges on the right hand side are in the wrong place. Now they're in the right place. There you go. From that point there, we can add a few more faces and stuff and start to pull out shapes. And when we pull out shapes, we can get more, we can get good responses and get it close as possible to the actual design. So there's my middle edge loop, and I'm putting that all over the place because it's just trying to make sure that everything seems relatively correct. Again, it's a matter of stopping sometimes, looking and trying to evaluate if you've got it right. One thing you might notice is obviously I'm not working in the origin. So when I come to mirror it, so I can work on one side, which will fundamentally give me every side, I end up with an issue. But I've put an empty in there. This is obviously mirroring inside of Blender. It is different in other packages, as I say. And that's me basically forcing the middle bits to merge together. So one side literally fits all. So it means I just work on one side and get the other side. Very quick, very simple. All packages do it. So as you go along, you want to add more information, as we've said. And the back edge of this object is actually pushed in a little bit. So I'm trying here to work out exactly where I should be putting in the subdivisions in order to make sure I can push those polygons in, and then looking at it and realizing that actually that's not the best way to go about this. If I do an insert, again, that's still not the best way of going about it. The idea is to basically make that edge face go inwards, and doing it any other way than actually physically building it to do it with something more akin to a bevel, a manifold bevel. It's not going to work exactly as you want. Whereas if I actually cut the edge just with a knife, I then get the faces with in between, which will do the job. So I can actually get the push inwards. And you can see there, it's just a matter of adding just one line across the top and keeping everything down to squares. Again, one of the things, obviously, that you're always trying to do, as I said before, is trying to keep things to quads, keep things to squares. Because when you're working with quads, the quality is always going to be cleaner and better. So in this instance, I'm using quads again, and you'll notice that all the corners, they actually are all just, they're kind of like 45-degree angles when they go in, so it's like creating a window frame. What that does, what that does, it means that I can then select those edges and then I can bevel those. And that means that I'm actually adding a bevel in with just enough information so that I can only have the nice roundness on that corner to match what's in the artwork. Again, I'm doing it here. In a lot of cases, a bevel, I'm using here is a bevel across the entire object, and I'm using the edge weight. So as I adjust the edge weight, that increases the bevel on that edge. That's how it works non-destructively in Blender. Obviously, in a lot of cases, in a lot of software, it's destructive. It's still not too destructive, but it means you can't go back. It's not a modifier you can change. Whereas here, it's a modifier that we can change, which is good. And then when we're happy with that, and we feel as though we've done it enough, I've actually started adding too many edges in here. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn these off in a minute, and just to keep the rounded edges. It is very, very gratifying when you come back to the image and you start to see similarities going on, and you start to see that actually your shapes are making sense, and also that you're not using a huge amount of edges. So this is our blocking, essentially. This is our not too heavy detail pass, just adding enough information to flesh out all the basic shapes. A little bit later on, I do actually try to cut at the back and the bottom on the back right hand side and the left hand side. Obviously I'm working on just one side to do both sides. There's all these divots in the back piece. Now this is still one solid piece of geometry, and for most part it is going to stay that way. But in all honesty, what I would probably do if I got onto a further stage is I would actually separate off the back as a separate piece of geometry, because fundamentally that is what it is. To get the gubbins inside of the camera, the whole back basically comes off. And here's another thing: if you're building something and you have real world knowledge of it, or you have real world reference and you can work these things out, make sure it does exactly what it does in the real world. So if it isn't physically connected, disconnect it. Select those polygon faces and extract them, and then have them as a separate object that you can then do details to. Also, it means that if there's higher levels of detail that are on that piece that are not on the other ones, like those little divots all down the side, and also the ones just above the switch, the red switch that takes the picture, that's the sort of stuff that means it doesn't have to be all across the entire object. It just has to be where it is on that. So here we are, we've got our first separate object. Now our actual camera lens is in the picture. This is where I start to realize I was slightly off, is not in the center of our camera. It is on the picture, but in order to make it right, I had to do some fixes. So I had to build it in relation to the artwork, the actual picture, and then when I'd gotten it right, I then move it back to the central point of our object, so I know that it actually is matching up. So what I'm doing there is I'm literally just doing an insert. So I'm just basically doing an extrude offset and extrude in, extrude offset, extrude in, offset and in, until it matches what the lens is actually doing. And then I move it back to where it should be on the camera. So if you look at it now, you can see we've got our lens sticking out through the front of the camera because we have no hole. So the best way to do a hole is to essentially add edge loops to make up the hole. Now, as you can see there, those edge loops are not going all the way around the geometry. So what I'm doing is I'm adding other loops that go around, and then I'm joining those together here and here. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side, because a little while ago, before I put that lens in, I also baked down the mesh. So I removed the modifiers. So now I'm going to select all those faces that are there in a second. Where are we? There we go. I'm going to select all those vertices, and I'm going to use the loop tools in Blender and make those into a circle. So now you can see that circle is a little bit outside of the constraints of our edge. So what we're going to do is do the same thing again, just scale those in, then select all those faces inside, and we're going to extrude those inwards. And by doing so, what we're doing is we're making sure that that goes around our lens object, and then I've got a face in there which I can get rid of. But what I'm also going to do before that is I'm going to put in a sphere, and that sphere is going to be our internal lens, because that's what it is. Essentially, a lens is a convex surface, which essentially is just the top part of a sphere. So we're going to get the sphere into the center with a little bit of finagling. The alignment tools in Blender are great. We're not going to remember where they are, but what you tend to do is you tend to pick your object, put the cursor in there to the center of the object, and then move your object to match up with the actual position of the cursor. It's all very clever. Now you can see that that sphere is not quite in the right place. It actually is, but I've got a problem with some geometry. So what I need to do is move a polygon face in. There you go. And now the sphere is sitting within... I can push that further back, can't I? I think I can. The sphere is sitting within the actual object itself that makes up the lens shape, the lens casing shape. And that is now just a little repositioning to make sure it sits in the right spot. But again, you know, and also there's room for improvement on that lensing positioning. The next bit, of course, is the little other viewport. The viewfinder, I suppose, is what the right word is. So essentially, it's just a cube. It's not difficult. It's just a cube. But it's got to be in the middle, but I've got to make sure I get it matched to our shape there. So the thing to do here is to basically match it up. Make sure it matches onto the back, on against the wall, and then I can scale it until it matches where it connects with the surface of our object. So I know that's correct, and I'll move that back to about the right place again. There you go. And then select the front face. In a minute, once I'm absolutely happy with the scale, I'll freeze it, I think. Should do. Almost there. Almost there, he says. There you go. And then we're going to take that and we're going to push that in offset and then extrude it inwards. So that's nicely out of the way. And we've got a little edge there again, just that small detail. And that's me turning the mesh on and off to check it. See if it's right. And then I'm going to duplicate that lens up because essentially the viewfinder element is pretty similar. And I'm going to move that, I'm going to pop that in the right place. Now obviously again I've got the same thing, I've got my base shape but I need a hole in it, so I can just add a series of edge loops, not too many, and then just straighten those off. So I'm going to select that edge, scale it flat and those all flat, and then pick those and then scale those ones in, and then again I've got another little patch which I can sit on and extrude inwards, which sorts out our viewfinder, which is all very nice. And as you can see, we're getting closer and closer to the actual final main elements of the object. There's a little bar that goes across the entire middle. So again, it's simple enough. It's just another cube. And we're going to match it up to the space where it should be. Pull it in so it's just inside of the geometric shape of the main box. And then scale that out until it fits. And then all of this is just going to work really light and lovely because it's perfect, obviously. We've got a large amount of our shape there in place. The next few things we need to do now is the other little bar that goes just above it, because the whole front of that top section actually lifts up so you can see the bulb inside. Now, it didn't get as far as doing that, but about the base shape, this is what we're talking about. So you can see here in that little render, it's looking nice and clean, which is good. And if we just change where the light position is, so we can see approximately what's going on. I did find I had a little issue there. I had a proportional scale on that I left on, and it was like, why is it when I'm scaling this, it's scaling everything? Couldn't understand what it was, and it was just the fact that the proportional scale was affecting absolutely everything that I was picking. I wasn't picking anything other than the ground, but it was like, I don't care, even if it's not connected, I'm going to scale. I did get there in the end, find out what it was. Not quite at this point, however. So there's my new land, putting it in, didn't need to do it, and then I worked out it was a scale. As I said, I'm leaving all the bits in just so you can see that sometimes somebody does something stupid. It just suddenly struck me, hang on, is that proportional scale? It looks like it. Anyway, the next thing to do was to sort out the switch at the side. So I needed to basically build a little bit more geometry, adding some more edge loops, so that I could pull that edge in and actually sort out a little area where the switch was. So the best thing to do was to scale all of those edges flat, and then move some of them across, so to make some of the edges in there. And then basically, once I've done that, didn't need to, there we go, straighten up. I've now got an area which I can then do an insert and then pull that back and then scale that accordingly so it matches up with the whole. I think I'll move that back actually eventually. Yeah, come on, that's it, lovely. So it's now matching up exactly, pretty much, with the little area around the switch. And this is me wondering about the edge loops and whether I should be putting them in. Fundamentally, I did not. I think I will do it, but I will do it when I've actually separated off the back. Excuse me, drinking. So most things there, it seems to be relatively in the right place for now. And that's me just shutting and restarting and wondering if that's going to solve my proportional scaling, which I haven't noticed is still on. We all make mistakes. Excuse me. And I think eventually I just, oh, there you go, Gary, you've turned it off. That'll solve everything. There you are. So now I'm going to build the little switch. Now, interestingly, it's, I just basically, the whole thing is made up with a lot of little sort of dinks sticking out of it. So the best thing to do with that is to bevel one corner, but also set our scales first, so they're all equal, and start adding edge loops to the edges so that I can then take the faces and extrude them out in order to get the little ridgy bits that are on there. So every single edge is not what I need to extrude, it's like every other. So what we do is we select a couple and then we do the select similar and then follow the lines and it just go dump, 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 and I can just pick all the little edges and then I can extrude those out along the normal, which is nice. Then all I've got to do is then select the entire object, scale it in a bit, and then do a little bit of finagling to make sure that it's in the right spots, and then also even a little bit more finagling to basically change the shape. And there we go. And then once I pop it back into our object, I need to basically just pull that in, extrude that back inwards. There you go. And so I've got that sticking out through a gap. And then what I want to do is I want to adjust the shape of that face. And this is where I do need a little bit of proportional scaling. And I'm picking too much stuff, just picking one of those. And again, it's that whole thing about little bits of detail later on in order to make the actual thing look more accurate. Yeah, and that's awful. So let's just pick this one, Gary. Just pick one. You can do this. That's a little better. No, it's not. Just one. And I'll get it right in a minute. I'll be happy with it in a second. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Just the one. There you go. And now I've got something that matches up more appropriately with our switch, which is good. I'm looking at this now. There's only a few things really that I need to sort of do in order to make sure that's all kind of finished. So it'll be adding another little bit into the front. So you can see I've increased the number of edge loops again, but also it's not everywhere. And I'm only adding it so I can cut a little hole in the surface. And you'll see it'll all start to make a lot of sense very shortly. So this is the front of my object. And I can actually space these evenly inside of Blender. You can just pick them, but I mean the thing is that I need this to look and feel accurate. So there you go, I'm just relaxing them, just relaxing those and spacing them, adjusting them slightly, because sometimes the easy way is always the hard way. You know, you've got to get things accurate, and sometimes it takes a little bit more work than you would like. Again, as I say, that's now pretty much bang on because it's a little bit to the right. I've also realized just now that I missed a screw, which is on the front, which pretty much is the head of a sphere, which I can easily put in. There goes our little tongue, which I'm assuming is some sort of focal thing. I'm guessing, no idea at all. I just bit the camera because I liked it. And there you go. That's predominantly most of it there done, I think. I don't think I did much more, apart from maybe a little render to see how it looked. Well, I mean, what can I say? That's it, fundamentally. Done, dusted. It's, you know, is there anything there that's missing? Yeah, my little handle from the front. So let's put that in. And again, basically, it's the simpler things are always the best. Keep it nice and simple. Try and lock it to an object if you can. Try and make it look right, in the right position. And in the instance of this, if you're talking about Blender, what I did was, but I do the same with anything. Put a cube, get in the right spot, delete the faces you don't need, then extrude them inwards, so you actually get the little handle. And that you'd say, well, that's it, pretty much. But there's a little rim that's actually extruded out on it as well. So I decided I would put that in too, so that it gets the right feel. And it kind of worked, but my problem was I was using a solidify for the extrude, which in this just basically adds thickness to an object, which is very good. But the corners weren't quite right, so I decided to go in there, work without the solidify, and then add one in afterwards. And there you have a teeny tiny little metal handle, which is doing exactly what it says on the camera. I think I'm going to start mucking with those again, and then I'm going to give up. I think hopefully I'm going to give up. Not in a bad way. It's just there are so many different ways you can actually skin that cat. As I said, taking off the object on the back and having it as a separate object is first and foremost the best option. As I say, I did kind of go a bit mental on this one. I don't quite know why I ended up fighting, trying to think if I can get it to work, and then realised just how many edge loops I was going to be putting in and decided it really wasn't worth it. But, you know, the actual, sometimes, as I said, it's good for you to see the stupid things that we do, so you know that everybody makes mistakes and does things they shouldn't do. In fact, I'm pretty sure that in a little while I'm going to take these out. My head was saying, this is the way to do it. And really my brain should have gone, no, Gary, stop. Just stop. Don't bevel them all and then extrude them in, which is exactly what I was going to do. It's and then looking at the number and going, I haven't got the number right. And again, that's another reason why it's a good idea sometimes to stop. Take a pause. Have a look at it. Be patient. Trust yourself. Don't go making silly decisions like I sometimes do. We all do it. Everyone does it. No one is fallible. So then I've got all my lovely edges and stuff, and then I think, oh, hang on, I've now got to compress them down. So I've got to move them all down. And dear, what was I thinking? Just stop, Gary. Just stop. Stop. You're going down a rabbit hole. And you think, hang on. Now, all of a sudden, I've got these really silly long lines where they're in between the edges, and it's just not worth it. Don't even try and fix it, Gary. It's just a bad idea. Just accept it. It's not going to work. Nah, just let it go. You know, don't hold back anymore. Just let it go. So I just put them back. And then I decided I don't want those ones, so I'm going to delete them. Because they're not necessary. Even some of the ones at the front there, not necessary. I need some of those. Still need those. But everything else, no, job's good. There you go. And those are in fact quads, believe it or not. It looks like they're not, but they are quads. And pretty much that is a very simple build, relatively quickly done. I do hope you found this of some interest. I hope it's been of some import and some help. If there's anything that you think I missed or I should have done, let me know. It does help me as much as it will hopefully help you. So there we go. Basic modeling guidelines, how to build stuff. Not too difficult to relatively finished thing. I think I did reasonably okay. It's still not perfect, but then it takes time to get everything perfect, and it takes time to get the fullness of the model done. Listen guys, look after yourselves, take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one, and hopefully I will be a little less croaky. So please forgive that, the occasional cough, and also the gaps when I've been drinking water to try and get myself through this. Take care guys, speak to you soon, bye.